The American dream is supposed to be about having a fair shot at opportunity, but for millions of us, that dream is being priced out of existence by rents that just keep climbing. In a country where the national median rent is stubbornly hovering over $1,700 a month, a place to call your own can feel more distant than ever. It's a quiet desperation felt during late-night budget planning and anxious dinner table conversations all across the nation. We're told to work harder, save more, find a new way. But what do you do when the math just doesn't add up anymore? So, we went looking for a different answer. We started searching for the last affordable places in America. We scrolled past endless listings for four-figure rents, hunting for a number that feels like a myth, a relic from a different time. $300 a month, and we found it. It's real. In forgotten towns and overlooked zip codes. There are listings promising a roof over your head for the price of a few weekly grocery trips. It looks like the ultimate life hack, an escape hatch from a system that feels rigged. So we went to find these places. We went looking for those $300 rents, thinking we might find a blueprint for a new, more attainable American dream. But what we discovered was a different kind of trap. We found a nightmare of collapsing infrastructure, deep isolation, and hidden costs that turn an unbelievable bargain into a threat. A mirage shimmering over a landscape of decay. This is the story of what happens when the floor of the American economy gives way completely. The journey to ground zero, our hunt for the $300 phantom, had to start in the American Rust Belt. These are the towns gutted by deindustrialization, where the ghosts of factories and foundries still loom over the landscape. On paper, they're a paradox. Statistically, they're the most affordable places in the country, but they're also losing people year after year a slow, quiet exodus that tells a story the real estate ad doesn't. Our first stop was a name that's become synonymous with American decline. Gary, Indiana. Once a titan of industry, the magic city of steel, its story is now a cautionary tale written in rust and ruin. The name alone conjures images of abandonment, of a prosperity so total that its collapse left a vacuum nothing has managed to fill. The population here has been in free fall for decades. Driving into downtown Gary is surreal. It's not just quiet, it's silent. Grand, pre-war buildings stand like ornate tombstones, their windows boarded, their majestic facades crumbling. Vast, empty lots sit where entire city blocks once thrived. It feels less like a city and more like an archaeological site monument to a forgotten civilization. This is home to some of the cheapest real estate in the entire country, where you can find properties valued at a mind-boggling $32 per square foot. It's a number that seems impossible in the 21st century housing market. We found an online listing for a small apartment in a weathered brick building, just a few blocks from the decaying grandeur of the Old City Methodist Church. The rent was advertised at $350. The dream, right there in black and white. But standing on that street, the dream dissolved. The building was flanked by two others with caved-in roofs. The street was a patchwork of asphalt and potholes. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, weighted with the absence of life of kids, playing, of cars driving by, of commerce. There was nothing. The journey here felt like a journey back in time, not to a simpler era, but to the moment of impact, the precise point where a city's economic heart stopped beating. The promise of cheap rent is what brought us here, but our first impression wasn't of opportunity. It was one of profound, unnerving loss. We were standing in a place where the cost of housing had fallen to nearly zero, because the value of being there had already vanished. The architecture of abandonment. To understand the $300 rent, you have to understand the landscape that creates it. It's a landscape of systemic failure, where the physical environment is the first and most obvious casualty. We call it the architecture of abandonment. In Gary, this architecture is on a monumental scale. The skeletal remains of the steel mills that gave the city life now preside over its decay. Entire neighborhoods have been effectively erased, with just one or two houses standing defiantly on a block that nature is reclaiming. The population has hemorrhaged, dropping by as much as 50% in some areas since the 1990s. This isn't a slow decline, it's a full-scale retreat, and when people leave, they take the tax base with them. The money to fix roads, maintain streetlights, and demolish unsafe buildings, all disappears. The few rental properties that exist for a few $100s aren't a gift from a generous landlord. They're often the last gasp of a property owner with no other options. The buildings are old and neglected, depreciating so fast that any investment is a guaranteed loss. You can't sell a home where half the houses are gone. You can't renovate a property when there's no functioning economy to support a higher rent. So, you charge what you can, for as long as you can, before the roof finally gives in. It's not a housing market, it's a liquidation sale. From Gary, we traveled east to another epicenter of the cheap rent mirage, Flint, Michigan, specifically the 48,505 zip code, a place that holds the grim distinction of being one of the single most affordable zip codes in the United States. Here, the median home price is less than the local median salary, an affordability ratio that sounds like a dream for anyone crushed by coastal housing markets. But as we drove through North Flint, the dream once again curdled. The architecture of abandonment here is different. It's more intimate, more residential, block after block of small, boarded-up single-family homes. These were once the bedrock of the American middle class, the homes of auto workers who powered the nation's economy. Now, they are monuments to its collapse. And in Flint, the decay isn't just economic, it's biological. The Flint water crisis shocked the world, a story of government failure so profound. It feels like something from a dystopian novel. Although officials state the water has met federal standards for years, the crisis created a deep, unshakable mistrust. Even now, with thousands of lead pipes replaced, a significant part of the population refuses to drink the tap water. It's a psychological scar on the community, a constant reminder that the most basic systems can fail you. This is the true context of the $300 rent. It's a price that reflects an environment where you can't trust the water from your faucet. It's a price set in a community where unemployment has soared past 10%, double the national average, because the main employer left town decades ago. In these places, the cheap rent is the ultimate red flag. It signals that the normal rules of real estate are suspended. You're not just renting an apartment, you're stepping into a void. As economists call it, you're entering a poverty trap, where the low cost of entry is dwarfed by the impossibly high cost of staying and the utter impossibility of getting out. This isn't a life hack, it's a dangerous gamble. The high cost of zero infrastructure, the number on the rental listing is the bait. The hidden costs are the trap. In a functioning city, rent is your biggest expense, but it also buys you access to a web of services you take for granted. Power that stays on, water that's safe to drink, roads that are maintained, access to grocery stores, hospitals, and the internet. In the world of $300 rent, you pay for every single one of those things, one way or another. This is the high cost of zero infrastructure. Let's start with the most basic element, water. In Flint, even with officials declaring the water safe, the legacy of the crisis means many residents still spend a big chunk of their income on bottled water. This isn't a choice. It's a non-negotiable expense born from broken trust. Estimates suggest this can add $100 to $250 a month to a household's budget. Suddenly, your $300 rent is effectively $550, just for water you feel safe using. Now, let's talk about power. In cities like Gary, a dwindling tax base has left the electrical grid fragile. Power outages aren't just an annoyance. They're a regular feature of life, sometimes lasting for days because the budget to maintain and repair the system isn't there. Imagine trying to work from home, or just keep your food from spoiling, when the power is a constant question mark. But the most insidious costs come from service deserts. We traveled to towns on the edges of the Deep South, like Gadsden, Alabama, and parts of Shreveport, Louisiana. Here, too, you can find the siren song of cheap property, a remnant of fading industrial economies. What you won't find are essential services. In many of these isolated areas, the nearest hospital or fully stocked grocery store can be a 45 to 60-minute drive away. There's no public transit to speak of. It was one of the first things cut from city budgets. A car isn't a luxury. It's a lifeline. So, let's do the actual math on that. $300 a month apartment. First the rent, $300, then the commute. Not for work, but just to survive, to get groceries, see a doctor, or run basic errands. An hour or more of driving, several times a week. At today's gas prices, that can easily add $200 to $400 a month to your expenses, plus wear and tear on your car, which you're now completely dependent on. Next, water. If you're in a place like Flint, add another $100 to $250 for bottled water. Now, internet. These service deserts are also digital deserts. Forget fiber optic, you're lucky to get reliable broadband at all. The only option is often satellite internet, which is slower and more expensive, running between $100 and $150 per month for a basic plan. Let's add it up. Your $300 rent, the number that seemed like a miracle, has now become a bill for $700, $900, or even over $1,100. And that's before electricity, heat, or the overpriced food at the corner store that has to truck everything in. The savings haven't just disappeared. They've been eaten by the hidden tax of a collapsed system. You aren't saving money. You're trading one high rent payment for a dozen smaller payments that bleed you dry, all while living in an environment stripped of the basic dignities of modern life. The mirage of the $300 rent isn't just an illusion, it's an economic vortex, pulling you into a deeper, more complicated poverty. These stories are often hidden, buried in the fine print of a life few outsiders ever see. If you've ever experienced the hidden costs of moving to a cheap town, share your story in the comments. What did you discover that nobody told you about? What was the one expense you never saw coming? Your story could be a warning that saves someone else from falling into the same trap. The social mechanics of total isolation, the financial costs are staggering, but they're only part of the story. The true price of the $300 rent is paid in a currency you can't easily measure: human connection. What we found in these towns was not just a collapse of infrastructure, but a collapse of society itself. These are the social mechanics of total isolation. In a healthy community, your home is a node in a network. You're connected by roads, schools, parks, and neighbors. In places like Gary, Flint, or the forgotten corners of the Deep South, that network has been severed. The most obvious isolator is the complete dependence on a car. Public transportation has been gutted. In Gary, for instance, bus services were slashed dramatically, effectively stranding anyone who couldn't afford a car or the gas to run it. Even with a car, the roads themselves are a barrier. They're cratered with potholes that go unfixed for years, turning a 10-minute drive into a jarring ordeal. This physical isolation is constant. There's no casual stroll to a coffee shop or a quick trip to the library, because those places often don't exist anymore. Vanishing city budgets have forced the closure of community pillars, libraries, public pools, recreation centers, stripping away the very spaces where a community connects. This isolation breeds a deeper, more dangerous social breakdown. The safety net disintegrates. In some of the areas we researched, emergency response times are terrifyingly long. It can take 30 to 60 minutes for police or an ambulance to arrive. Imagine having a medical emergency and knowing that help is an hour away. This isn't a hypothetical. It's a daily reality for thousands. This collapse of services creates a vacuum, and crime often rushes in to fill it. Areas with high abandonment are breeding grounds for criminal activity. Flint's homicide rate, for example, has been more than double the national average. It transforms the quiet streets from peaceful to menacing. The silence is no longer a sign of peace. It's a sign that you are on your own. This is the grim reality confronting the new wave of arrivals: remote workers, retirees, and others lured by the promise of a quiet, affordable life. They arrive seeking an escape from the rat race, only to find themselves profoundly alone. The dream of a tight-knit small town is shattered by the reality of empty streets and neighbors who are either gone or too exhausted by their own struggle to connect. There are no modern amenities, no vibrant Main Street, no places to gather. The quiet they sought turns into a suffocating isolation, a disconnection from the world that's far more costly than any big city rent. You're not just moving into a cheap apartment, you're moving into a social void. You forfeit the invisible benefits of community safety, connection, shared resources, and mutual support. The $300 rent buys you four walls, but outside those walls, there is often nothing left. It's a life lived in a permanent quarantine, a solitude that eats away at the human spirit. That is a price no one can afford. The future outlook and the dead town warning signs after traveling through the heart of this affordability mirage. The final question is there any hope? Is this a temporary downturn, or is it a terminal diagnosis? For most of these $300 towns, the long-term outlook is bleak. Many of these regions are not just being bypassed by the economy, they're also on the front lines of climate change. The same crumbling infrastructure that can't handle a power surge is even less prepared for more frequent Midwest floods or the intensifying heat of the Deep South. These environmental pressures will only accelerate the decay, making these areas even more unlivable. The demographic trends paint an equally grim picture. Cities like Flint and Gary aren't stabilizing. They are still losing people, at a rate of around 1% every single year. This steady drain ensures that recovery is unlikely. Without people, there is no tax base. Without a tax base, there is no investment in the future. It's a death spiral, with few signs of reversing. For anyone tempted by a too-good-to-be-true rental listing in a forgotten town, we've put together a list of dead town warning signs. These are the red flags, pulled from our research, that tell you a town's cheap rent is a symptom of its decline. First, look for a high vacancy rate. If more than 20% of the homes in a neighborhood are visibly vacant or abandoned, it's a critical sign that the community is no longer viable. Second, check on basic utilities. Are there frequent unresolved issues with the water or the power grid? Are local forums filled with complaints about service interruptions? This is a sign of a government that can no longer provide the most essential services. And third, look for a lack of new construction. Is anyone building new homes or commercial developments? If all you see is decay and no signs of renewal, it means investors, both big and small, have already written the town off. No one is betting on its future. Now, to be fair, it's not uniformly hopeless everywhere. There are faint glimmers of hope on the periphery. Some outer edges of the Rust Belt, like the Johnstown, Pennsylvania metro area, are seeing a slight stabilization, while Johnstown itself still struggles. Its proximity to more robust economic centers like Pittsburgh has created a small buffer. Similarly, towns like Gadsden, Alabama, may benefit from the ripple effects of the revival in nearby Birmingham. But these are the exceptions that prove the rule. And these are not the $300 towns. These are the $900 towns, the places where some semblance of an economy still exists. The true dead zones, the ones that dangle the fantasy of near free rent, show no such signs of life. They remain trapped in a cycle of decline, places where the American dream has gone to die. Our journey started with a simple, seductive idea, that in the forgotten corners of America, a solution to the crushing cost of living was waiting. We were looking for a loophole, a clever way to beat a broken system. We held up the $300 rent as a beacon of hope. But after traveling through these hollowed-out towns, talking to the people left behind, and adding up the true costs, the conclusion is inescapable. The $300 rent isn't a solution, it's a symptom. It's the final fever of a dying town. It is a dangerous gamble, not a life hack. The allure of financial freedom is a mirage that masks a landscape of deep liabilities. The money you think you're saving is taken from you in other ways through crippling transportation costs, the need to buy basic resources like water, and the high price of non-existent services. These hidden costs don't just erase your savings, they often exceed them. More than that, the cost isn't just financial. The cheap rent is the price of admission to a world of crippling isolation, where the fabric of community has unraveled, leaving behind a void of crumbling infrastructure and social decay. You aren't getting a deal on a home. You are buying a piece of a collapse. You're moving to a place the rest of the country has already left behind. The problem of housing affordability in America is real and devastating, but the answer won't be found by scavenging through the ruins of our industrial past. Escaping to a place where the foundation has already crumbled is not an escape at all. It's a trap. The real solution, as difficult as it may seem, has to be in rebuilding that foundation right where we are. It must be found in demanding policies that create truly affordable housing within living, breathing communities. It must be found in investing in our cities and towns, not running from them. The American dream can't be a solitary retreat into the cheapest, most isolated corner of the country. It has to be a collective endeavor, a dream of a place where everyone has a safe, stable home within a community that is alive and well. If this investigation opened your eyes to the hidden realities behind the numbers, subscribe for more stories that uncover the truth about our economy and our country. We go to the places and talk to the people that are too often ignored. Hit the bell so you don't miss what we uncover next. Thank you for watching.